The SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket is by far the most successful and cheapest dollar to kilogram ratio out on the market at the time. The Falcon 9 rocket is also one of the most reliable rockets to ever fly, as it has lots of redundancy. Its parts are also so cheap to manufacture that the rocket is considered one of the cheapest orbital rockets ever. So how did SpaceX achieve this? Well, that is what we're going to be finding out in this video. Let's get into it. The Falcon 9 rocket is extremely cheap. The cost per launch comes in at just $67 million per launch. You might be thinking that that is really expensive, but no, that is extremely cheap when talking about rockets. A great example of how expensive rockets are is the Saturn V rocket. The Saturn V was the rocket that took humans to the moon for the Apollo program. It costed NASA approximately $1.23 billion per launch. Another perfect example is the Atlas V rocket. Each launch cost about $110 million or more, depending on many variables such as the orbit, the weight, and many other things. So, you may now be wondering, how does SpaceX make it so that Falcon 9 is almost 2 times cheaper than competitor rockets? Well, you see, the answer is particularly simple. They just need to produce their equipment and systems in-house. But they do not produce everything in-house, they only produce around 80% of their materials in-house. But that is still an incredible amount of materials that they produce in their factories out at the Cape. They obviously do not produce some parts such as the nuts, bolts, hoses, wiring, etc. But they do make most of their computer chips, fuel tanks, capsules, and engines. However, their engines are built and tested at another facility of theirs in Texas. SpaceX's McGregor engine test facility produces Merlin and Raptor engines. It makes one Merlin 1D engine every 16 hours, then most of the time they roll the engines out and static fire them. That is what they do with both Merlins and Raptors. Another way they make the rockets extremely cheap is by reusing parts of it. After most companies just separate the booster and it falls into the ocean to never be seen again. But SpaceX saw that and came up with the idea of trying to land their rockets. So they began to bring that idea to life. They added grid fins to the booster to steer through the atmosphere, and landing legs for it to touch down safely, as well as RCS thrusters, heat shields, and a lot more other helpful components. Their first attempted landing was on the CRS, or Commercial Resupply Services 5 mission, which launched on January 10, 2015. Ascent was nominal, but when the booster came down for a landing, they did have an extremely large explosion. They kept blowing up rockets for a whole year until Falcon 9 launched OG-2, or Orbcomm-2. OG-2 launched successfully and was the first time a Falcon 9 booster would return back to land on land. The landing burn started, the landing legs then deployed, and touchdown, the Falcon 9 had landed for the first time, making it the first orbital rocket to successfully land. They now land them regularly, and the last time the landing failed was over a year ago. They now have boosters that have flown over 12 times, and which has saved SpaceX a ton of money. The SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket is easily one of the most reliable rockets to ever fly. It has had a total of 149 launches, and only 2 have ever failed, 1 in flight and 1 on the pad. That gives Falcon 9 a 98.6% success rate. That is crazy. Also considering that Falcon hasn't failed since September 3rd of 2016. That has been 6 years since it failed last. That is amazing, but the question is still there. How is it so reliable? One of the main ways it is so reliable is that it has 9 engines on the first stage. It will be very hard for all 9 Merlin engines to fail at once during a 2.5 minute burn of all 9. They can lose up to 3 engines at different portions of the flight. They can lose 2 instantaneously after liftoff, and another one during flight and still be able to launch successfully. It would just sacrifice the landing of the booster. Another way is just testing and lots of launches. There has to be lots of testing to fix any issues and finding issues. Also, launching is another way. If you launch and you experience something that you didn't plan for, then you will tweak the vehicle, and then hopefully you will never encounter that issue again. So that's how Falcon is so reliable. That's just a simple video on how SpaceX achieves their reliability and success. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next video.